Gospel of the lesson this morning. Guess what gospel of the lesson's coming out this morning? Some of you have been here for weeks. Okay, yes, Matthew. Gospel lesson this morning is out of Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 to 20. Matthew 18, 15 to 20. These are the words of Jesus as given to us by Matthew, and he says this. Jesus says, if another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. This is the word of God to the people of God. Am I the only one hearing that high pitched noise?
No, I'm here.
No, I mean,
Just start muting things. Don't start with my mic though. Y'all might be here. Sorry about that, Eric. So, a woman goes into a gun shop, and she goes to the person behind the counter and says, I need a revolver for my husband. And the guy behind the counter goes, well, did your husband tell you what kind of revolver you wanted? And she said, no, he doesn't even know I plan to shoot him. Well, then. Whoa. Jesus' understanding of conflict resolution is a little bit different than that joke, as we have heard from the text this morning. Jesus is not concerned with elimination, but Jesus is concerned with reconciliation. In a book written by a man named Conrad Simons, he writes a book called In Search of God. He tells a true story about his family and life experience that he had. He talks about being on vacation with his sister and his mother and his father I'm trying to remember where they were, in northern Minnesota. He says it was a beautiful day, that there was just maybe a cloud or 2 in the sky that kind of helped make the day interesting. But it was one of those days where you can just relax and feel good about everything, that the tensions melt away, and that you just feel great. But they weren't feeling great that day. There was an issue. Simonson's sister had returned from visiting their brother, who was a pastor out in Montana. And when she was telling the story about their visit, it reminded their father that the pastor in Montana owed him some money. Apparently the son had borrowed some money from his father, quite a substantial amount, and never paid it back. Never said any more about it. And the more and more the father thought about it, the angrier and is that a good word, angrier? The matter, he got really upset. That's what I'm trying to say here. He got really mad. And so it just kind of ruined the day. Everybody was on edge. They couldn't talk. The mother was talking about how she'd like to see that son again. It's been so long. And the father would jump in with, not until he pays me back the money he owes me, and that kind of stuff. And things went downhill from there. Simon remembers sitting down after this going on and writing a letter to his brother and telling his brother how angry the father had been, how it ruined the day there when the family was together, and that it really had become an issue. The absent brother responded by writing a letter to the father. And in the letter, he acknowledged his debt. He laid out his financial situation. He said that he could not pay him back at this time, and explained why. And really, that was all it took. Once the father had heard that, had read that letter, the anger evaporated away. He realized that the son just wasn't kind of stiffening for the money, but that there were real reasons, and that he was sorry that he couldn't pay him back. About 6 months later, a few months later, the parents visited out in Montana to this son that they hadn't seen in years, and it went really well. Everybody had a great time. And about 6 months after that, the mother and father were in a very serious automobile accident. The mother was critically injured, and Simonson called his brother and told him, and he rushed from Montana back to the family's home, spent time with the mom and the dad, and the mom eventually died. And the dad and his brother helped each other through the grief process. And Simonson talks about seeing his brother and father working through these terrible hours together. And he concludes his stories with these words, his story with these words. He says, the thought went through my head, if God has ever acted in my life, it was then. And I thought that was really an interesting way to end that. If God had ever acted in my life, it was then. And you got to wonder when. You know, was it when the brother came to the hospital? I don't think that's what Simonson was talking about. Was it when the brother comforted the father? No, that's not what he was talking about either. When God acted in Simonson's life, it's when God kind of put it in Simonson's mind to write his brother and tell him about the conflict that was there between he and his dad. It was when he wrote his brother that God had worked in the family. That relationship had stifled the relationships of everybody else. It put a pall over everything, the family, their lives. But the letter telling the brother about the problem and need for action, that was the hand of God at work in his life. The letter pried the can off the lid off that can of worms that had to be opened and brought out so people could see what was going on, and something had to be done. The situation was brought into the healing light of God. Now, fortunately, the brother responded in a mature way. He wrote his father a letter back that really affected the reconciliation. Not everybody responds like that. I mean, he could have just ignored it and never responded back. He could have said, well, you know, Dad can't afford it. What's he all upset about? He could have told his dad to go jump in the lake, but he didn't. He wrote a nice letter back explaining the situation. He was a decent man, and it worked out well. But that story